Former Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard went full clown, slamming Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for their non-existent open border policy. And this was just a couple days after she appeared on Fox News to spread pro-war propaganda. So for any typical Republican lawmaker, this wouldn't be news. They make ridiculous claims like open borders all the time. But this is Tulsi Gabbard, somebody who used to pretend to be a progressive, endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2016, ran herself in 2020, dropped support for Medicare for All in the middle of that campaign, and gradually over the course of the past 3 or so years, it's clear that Tulsi Gabbard never actually cared about any progressive policy. It was all just a play for votes, and now she is trying to play to a conservative base. So this tweet really is remarkable, and I will play for you the Fox News appearance as well later on, though I think a lot of you have already seen that. But first, here we go. So this was last night, tweeting out, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the humanitarian and national security crisis on the southern border is the direct result of your open border policy. As I said in my 2020 presidential campaign, we can't have a secure nation if we don't secure our borders. Open border policy? To truly understand how ridiculous this claim is, I'm going to have to show you what Biden is doing right now at the border. So first of all, yes, there are issues at the border. But it's not because of open border policy. It's because there aren't enough people that have been hired to process the amount of asylum seekers that are coming in. But Joe Biden right now is using a Trump-era CDC rule. So this from the cut. U.S. government is able to quickly expel migrants without giving them a chance to file their asylum claim because of a Trump-era CDC rule called Title 42. The directive, which was established in March 2020 and overrides all other federal laws, uses an obscure 1944 public health statute to justify indefinitely closing the border to non-essential travel, even though the statute had never been used to regulate immigration before. So Joe Biden is doing what Donald Trump was doing. There is no criticism here from the right of Joe Biden on the border. There just isn't, because he is doing what Trump did. The only actual criticism is from the left. The total lack of humanity that Joe Biden's policies are instituting at the border is the real issue here. The lack of people to process the amount of asylum seekers coming in is the actual issue. There is no open border policy. They're currently deporting these immigrants back. But Tulsi Gabbard just continues to try to appeal to the lowest common denominator, in this case, conservative lunatics. Now, just to go a little further in criticizing Joe Biden here, Amnesty International points out that what Joe Biden is doing is essentially a violation of international law. So this from Amnesty International. The rights of migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers are protected by international law, regardless of how and why they arrive in a country. They have the same rights as everyone else, plus special or specific protections, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states that everyone has the right to seek and enjoy asylum from persecution in other countries, the 1951 UN Refugee Convention, which protects refugees from being returned to countries where they risk being persecuted, and the 1990 Migrant Workers Convention, which protects migrants and their families, and regional refugee law instruments. So there are international rules in place that Biden right now appears to be violating by his approach here at the border. Yet, according to Tulsi Gabbard, he has an open border policy. It's so stupid. Now, last thing here, I'm sure many of you already saw this, as I said, but I'm going to play this. Tulsi Gabbard was here on Fox News selling people on the idea of airstrikes.
So as long as these Islamist jihadists are waging war against us, we have to work to defeat them militarily and ideologically. And militarily, we have two choices in how we do that. Number one, we can continue to invade and occupy and nation build in countries around the world, just as we did in Afghanistan at great cost. Number two, we can take a targeted approach using airstrikes, using our special forces to go in and go after these terrorist cells.
Now, keep in mind, this was just days after the U.S. government admitted to killing 10 civilians, mostly children, in an airstrike in Afghanistan. Tulsi Gabbard then comes on Fox News to support more drone strikes. So this is your anti-war candidate, as some fake leftists claimed back in 2020. That's why they backed Tulsi Gabbard over Bernie Sanders. Tulsi, the real anti-war candidate. Unbelievable. But here you have Tulsi Gabbard taking the mask off, exposing herself as a complete clown.